May I now call upon stage Mr. Vinod Keni, please? Mr. Keni is from the Artha Venture Fund, and he leads investments in seed stage companies.
Thank you. So nice to see a full house on a Saturday, especially this being the Republic Day weekend. Most people will sort of take the weekend off, but as an entrepreneur, I think your jobs are never really off, right? You're 24/7, like you said. Having said that, I just want to understand from a show of hands, how many of you here are first-time entrepreneurs? Or pretty much most. How many of you are thinking of becoming one and are attending this to get more information? Oh, only one. Wow. How many of you have already started a business or started a couple of businesses, done well, failed, shut shop? Quite a few. And the big question, how many of you have raised money? Okay, there's some. So I think for most of you who have come here, the big question I think you're all here is, how do I raise money? Because I'm sure you sort of open the newspapers or read whatever news is out there, online, offline. And one of the things that you probably see is the sheer number of announcements about company X having raised some stupendous amount of money, company Y having raised money, all of that, right? And then you sort of wonder and says, hey, listen, I'm doing something, remarkable, and why is it that I'm not able to, or why I have not still raised money? And probably that's one of the reasons why, a lot of you are here. And I'm going to essentially take a quick 2 to 5 minutes to tell you as to what an investor like us looks for, right? And of course, some of this is also based on the fact that I've been investing in my personal capacity since the 90s, which means I've been probably investing even before some of you were born. I have been investing as a fund since 2011, which also means that I think I've been investing since some of you were in high school. But which also means that whatever I sort of say also comes with a lot of experience, but also comes with a fair amount of cynicism as well. So I think today being Saturday, whatever I say, take it with a pinch of salt or with a big dose of sugar, whichever you prefer. So having said that, so what is it that we as investors look for, right? And that's something that you guys are constantly trying to figure out, because each one of them sort of gives out different messages. People are sort of not really saying things, or even if people do, it's all sort of very mixed as well. But before that, let me also take a step back and tell you, if you are an entrepreneur, this is one of the best times to be one. Because there is a boatload of money out there. I mean, I'm sure you all hear about the economy slowing down and all of that, but there is a tremendous amount of liquidity in the market, which means that there is a boatload of money out there, angels everywhere, investors everywhere. The sheer number of funds that operate in India, especially seed and early stage funds, is fairly a significant number, which also means that just like you sort of have to chase down investors, there are investors who actually chase down good deals, and there's actually competition amongst investors to invest in good deals too. Which means that you sort of have to then say, how do I really sort of become one who's actually chased by an investor, right? Because I think that's a dream that almost every one of us have had at some point or the other as an entrepreneur, to say, wouldn't it be nice for multiple investors to come knocking on my door and says, here, take my money. And that doesn't happen every day. So having sort of said that, let me also say that, because of this sheer amount of liquidity, and there is a lot of money out there, what also becomes important is to pick the right investor. Because like I said, money is a commodity, and money at this point is available in the plenty, which means that whoever you're raising money from has to be able to sort of continue to keep supporting you as and when you need money, till you get to a point where you may not need money, or you need a larger investor to step in. Or two, is also capable of actually helping you on a whole bunch of other things, which is helping you with connects and all of the other things that are sort of needed to sort of build a successful enterprise, right? So with that in mind, let me sort of quickly tell you what is it that early stage investors look for. The one big thing that we all look for, and I think this is something that most entrepreneurs tend to really not pay attention to, or some of them don't necessarily pay attention to, is how big the market is. Everybody, we are sort of, as entrepreneurs, we're all sort of tunnel vision, right? We're sort of looking at our own product or service and we think this is actually something there. And we also tend to think that because we've been working on it for so long, that we are the only unique player. So one thing is, we as investors always say, nothing is unique. If you're doing it, there are 100 others, including kids in a garage, bathroom, working on something very similar. So never ever go saying I'm a unique one, because that means that you don't know what's happening in the market, which also means that you're going to get shut down. The second is the fact that you have to make sure that the problem that you're solving is a problem that is real. And one thing that we all as investors really want to see and invest in is something that is a need to have, not a good to have. Anything that sort of looks like, it's nice to have, yeah, maybe sort of not necessarily, a need to have, doesn't really work, especially in a market like India. India is a very value conscious driven market, right? So consumer as well as enterprise is always very hard, which also means that you have to have a product that is very, very compelling. The only exception to that may be somebody like an Apple, which sort of created an entire category, right? Where they sort of went out and said, I'll go and create a product which nobody had even thought about would be needed, but has ultimately now become a must have, right? But those are exceptions and those are outliers, which essentially means that your product has to be a must have rather than a need to have. The other thing that we all look for, and I think this is something that a lot of you also don't really pay attention to, is a fairly well-rounded team. So not everybody only looks for technology. Not everybody only looks for guys who come from IITs and IIMs. So that's a perception that's incorrect. I mean, there are people who are college dropouts who have sort of gone out and built businesses. Classic example, Ritesh from OYO, right? I mean, he's not even a graduate, he's a college dropout. So that way there are several successful entrepreneurs who have been able to raise money, which essentially goes back to saying, as an entrepreneur, what are the key things you should be in a position to do? One is visualize a product or a service that you can actually sell. Two, the ability for you to sell, which also means that you can't technically say, hey, listen, I'm a technology guy, or I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer, so I can't really sell. An entrepreneur's role, a primary role, is selling. And if you sort of come to me saying that I'm not really able to sell, then nobody will invest in you till you sort of have to go out there and sell. Because believe me, selling is something that's central to our lives, irrespective of what we are, right? I mean, whether we're an employee, husband, father, even going out there and trying to, woo a girl or a boy or whatever else, we're always constantly selling. So selling becomes really something that's very critical, which also means that either you actually have that, or you have an amazingly good sales guy who can sell ice to the Eskimos. And if you have that, then you sort of actually crossed a major hurdle, right, of being able to sell a product or a service. The third that we always look for is how much of the product is already done. Nowadays, nobody's sort of funding ideas. Anybody at the idea stage saying, hey, listen, I've been staring at my navel and I've got this idea that I want to do, very, very few of you get funded, unless it's coming from friends, family, and fools. Most investors never really invest in idea stage, unless, of course, there are also exceptions to that, but if I take those exceptions out, most of them want to look at an MVP, a minimal viable product, and something that is sort of being sold and has customers. So these become really, really important. And the last but not the least, and this is something that it's a very pet peeve of mine, and I sort of keep saying this that wherever that I go out to speak about, right, is don't essentially go out there thinking that your business is worth 100 crores. Your business is worth 0. And we always go with that assumption it's 0, which essentially means you have to be in a position to very, very clearly sort of understand what your capital needs are and be able to articulate that to the investor, which also means that there's a fair amount of thinking and effort you guys need to put in really understanding, one, your business, how much capital you realistically need, and not need only now, in the future too, and really come back and says, listen, this is what I'm building. Here's my painting, right? And here is what I'm going to paint. And for that to paint, I need these colors. And these colors, I need this much quantity over the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, right? And all of that is something that we really want to see. Now, you may be off by 50%, but the fact that you actually thought about it, the fact that you've actually been able to visualize what your product or your company is going to look like, the kind of people you're going to build, becomes very critical, because that's a very key ingredient of an entrepreneur. The ability for an entrepreneur to be able to visualize his or her company and be able to articulate that to investors, employees, everybody else. So these actually become really critical when we actually look at it. Others, I'm sure we have all spoken about, the passion, domain knowledge, the ability for you guys to be able to do jugaad, all of that. But these actually are the critical things that most of us as seed stage and early stage investors always look for, is the ability for you to sell. Does the product really address a problem that's fairly large and growing, or is it addressing a problem that is a must-have to have? Have they been selling, and do they actually have customers? Which also means that if still building the perfect product, stop and go out there and sell. Microsoft wasn't built with a perfect product, right? And we all know this. I mean, look at the sheer number of bugs and patches that everybody comes up with. Most technology companies have all gone out there with what? An MVP and started selling and getting customers. Which also means never spend too much time in trying to finish the product, because your customer interaction and your customer feedback is really important, right? So go out there and sell. The moment somebody comes to me and says, I have a product, it's halfway there, has some features, doesn't really have too many features, but I've got all these customers are now buying and continue to keep buying and paying, and more importantly, paying money, not free customers. Free customers you get every day. People who are paying, then I start really taking some interest in saying, okay, this is something that I really want to look at. So I want to keep this short, because I know there's a lot of presentations and a lot of people who are here to speak, but that's what I really wanted to sort of talk about and give you a few nuggets on what's really important for you guys as entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is a very lonely existence. So surround yourself with people, family, friends who are supportive, who continue to support you, because entrepreneurship is also about a lot of disappointments, which also means the mental resilience to be able to actually overcome a lot of the obstacles that you come across. But once you cross them, believe me, it's an amazing game. Thank you.